You spend 40 years building a career, raising a family, handling crisis after crisis like some kind of emotional superhero. Then you hit 50, and suddenly checking your email feels like climbing Everest. Your friends blame it on aging. Your doctor says your blood work looks fine. Meanwhile, you're sitting there wondering why ordering lunch from a menu now requires a 15-minute internal debate and a nap afterwards. Here's the thing about mental energy after 50. It doesn't just disappear because your body decided to betray you. It gets stolen, drained by invisible thieves you've been living with for decades without realizing they were robbing you blind. The exhausting part. Most of these energy vampires disguise themselves as normal parts of adult life. Responsible behavior, mature thinking, just being a good person. I learned this the hard way when my mother turned 53 and started calling me 3 times a day, asking if she was losing it. Sharp woman. Ran her own accounting firm for 28 years. Could calculate compound interest in her head faster than most people could find a calculator. Suddenly she couldn't remember if she'd taken her vitamins or why she walked into the kitchen. Her doctor ran every test, brain scans, thyroid panels, vitamin levels. Everything came back normal. Told her it was stress, told her to meditate. Real helpful. Turns out the problem wasn't her brain. It was what she was doing to her brain without realizing it. 7 specific things, actually. Little habits and patterns that were draining her mental battery faster than she could recharge it. Once she identified them and made some changes, not massive lifestyle overhauls, just targeted adjustments, she got her sharpness back within 6 weeks, started sleeping better, stopped forgetting conversations, could focus on her work again without feeling like her brain was wading through mud. The first energy drain nobody talks about is decision fatigue, but not the kind you think. Everyone knows making a million tiny decisions wears you out. What to eat, what to wear, which route to take to work. That's basic stuff. The real problem after 50 is something psychologists call recursive decision loops. Sounds fancy. What it means is, you've accumulated so much life experience that every single choice now triggers an internal consultation with 50 years of memories, mistakes, and what-ifs. You're not just deciding where to eat dinner. Your brain is simultaneously processing that time you got food poisoning at a seafood place in 1994, your daughter's shellfish allergy, even though she's 32 and doesn't live with you anymore, that article you read about sustainable fishing, your cholesterol numbers from last month's checkup, whether your spouse secretly hates Italian food but is too polite to say so, and the fact that your favorite restaurant changed ownership and might not be as good anymore. Young people make decisions with maybe 5 to 10 years of reference data. You're running every choice through a 50-year database. Your brain is doing more computational work for simple decisions than a young person's brain does for complex ones. And it's happening dozens of times per day for things that shouldn't require any mental effort at all. One guy I talked to, retired teacher, said he started timing himself on routine decisions, how long it took him to choose a coffee at Starbucks. 47 seconds of internal deliberation for a simple coffee order. He wasn't being indecisive. His brain was running a full analysis comparing caffeine tolerance at his age, his acid reflux medication, whether he should save money, if the sugar-free options were actually worse than regular sugar, what his wife would think if she knew he got whipped cream, and whether the barista would judge him for ordering something complicated. The solution isn't to make decisions faster. That just creates anxiety. The trick experienced people figured out is to create default choices for recurring decisions, not routines exactly. Defaults. Every restaurant type gets one default order that you've pre-approved. Italian, chicken marsala. Mexican, chicken fajitas. You can override the default anytime, but having it there cuts your decision processing by about 70%. Your brain doesn't have to run the full analysis unless you actively choose to. Same with clothes, morning routines, grocery shopping, all of it. You're not eliminating choice. You're eliminating the mental cost of choice for things that don't actually matter. Saves your decision-making energy for things that do. But here's where it gets tricky. Even if you solve decision fatigue, you're still getting drained by something else, something that actually gets worse the more successful you've been in life. The psychologists call it responsibility creep, but that sounds boring. What it really is? You've spent 50 years becoming the person everyone calls when things go wrong. Your kids are adults. but they still need advice about jobs, relationships, money, parenting. Your aging parents need help with technology, medical decisions, financial planning. Your siblings call you because you're the responsible one. Your friends vent to you because you give good advice. Your co-workers, current or former, reach out for references, connections, guidance. You've become everyone's unpaid consultant, therapist, and tech support combined. Carrying that much cognitive and emotional load doesn't just drain time, it drains clarity. When your mind is constantly processing other people's problems, internal noise builds fast. And if you want to help your mind stay sharp, clear, and functional instead of overloaded, take a look at the Brain Song. It's a science-based method designed to pull the brain out of mental overload and restore real focus in just 12 minutes a day. You'll find the link in the first pinned comment. Each individual request seems small. Answer a question, give some advice, make a phone call, review a document. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. But your brain doesn't just spend 5 minutes on each request. It spends energy loading the full context of that person's situation, your relationship history, what you know about their patterns, what advice you've given before, whether they actually follow advice or just want validation, what the consequences might be if your advice is wrong. Then it spends more energy after the interaction, doing a post-game analysis. Did you say the right thing? Should you have been more direct? Are they going to be upset? Do you need to follow up? Should you have offered more help? Your brain is running relationship maintenance calculations in the background while you're trying to focus on your own life. Veterans of this particular trap learn to do something that feels rude at first but saves enormous amounts of energy. They create response tiers. Not every request gets full engagement. Some get what they call a acknowledge and redirect. Someone asks for advice about something you've already advised them on 3 times. You know what? I think my best answer is the same as last time we talked about this. Do you remember what we discussed? Puts the energy back on them to recall and apply information instead of you re-delivering it. Some requests get scheduled instead of handled immediately. That's a good question. Let me think about it and get back to you tomorrow. Sounds simple, but it prevents your brain from dropping everything to process someone else's problem right now. Lets you batch your helping energy instead of getting interrupted constantly. The weird part is how much people respect boundaries when you actually set them calmly. Most people aren't trying to drain you. They just don't realize they're doing it because you've trained them over decades that you're always available with infinite patience and wisdom. Which brings up the third drain. This one is sneaky because it masquerades as a virtue. Emotional labor for people who don't reciprocate. Not talking about normal friendships where support goes both ways. Talking about relationships where you're the forever listener, the endless source of empathy. The person who remembers everyone's birthdays and asks about their lives while they never remember basic facts about yours. You've got friends, maybe family members who call when they need something but are mysteriously busy when you're going through something, who talk about themselves for 45 minutes, then suddenly have to go when you mention something happening in your life, who expect you to be excited about their minor victories but can barely muster a "that's nice" about your major ones. After 50, this hits different than it did at 30. At 30, you had more energy to absorb. You could be generous with your attention because you had attention to spare. At 50, with all the other drains happening simultaneously, these one-way relationships start showing up on your energy budget like a suspicious charge on your credit card. Wait, why am I spending 3 hours a week supporting someone who can't remember if I have kids? Here's what makes this difficult. These people usually aren't malicious. They're just emotionally self-centered, and you've enabled it for so long that they genuinely don't notice the imbalance. Bringing it up feels petty, like you're keeping score in a friendship, which you're not supposed to do. Except your brain is keeping score whether you admit it or not, and every interaction with these people is withdrawing energy without depositing any. The people who handle this best don't have big confrontations. They just quietly reduce availability. Stop being the first to reach out. Stop asking detailed follow-up questions about their lives. Match their energy level instead of consistently exceeding it. Interesting thing happens. Some people notice the change and step up, realizing they've been taking you for granted. Those relationships get better. Others just fade out because they were only there for what you provided. Either way, you get your energy back. One woman I know, clinical psychologist in her 50s, said she did an audit of her relationships, wrote down everyone she had regular contact with, and honestly assessed whether each relationship added energy or drained it. Not whether she liked the person or whether they were a good person, just the actual energy economics. Found that about 30% of her social connections were pure drain with zero return. Not people in crisis who temporarily needed more support. People who had been draining her consistently for years. She didn't cut anyone off dramatically, just stopped initiating contact and stopped saying yes to every request for her time and emotional energy. 6 months later, her social circle was smaller, but her mental energy was dramatically higher. She had more to give to the relationships that actually mattered. Pretty clever, right? But even if you optimize decisions, set boundaries on your helpfulness and balance your relationships, there's still another thief. This one is particularly vicious because it convinces you it's helping. Consuming news and information like it's your job to stay informed about everything wrong with the world. Look, staying informed is reasonable. Knowing what's happening in your community, your country, the world, that's part of being an engaged citizen. But somewhere along the way, staying informed became marinating in a 24-hour stream of disasters, controversies, political rage, and things you can do absolutely nothing about. You check the news in the morning. Bad. Check it at lunch. Worse. Check it before bed. Terrible. Open social media to see what friends are up to. Instead, you get 17 opinions about some political situation, 4 stories about crimes in cities you don't live in, and a video of an environmental catastrophe happening on another continent. Your brain is processing trauma and outrage designed for a global population of 8 billion people. No human nervous system evolved to handle that. After 50, this hits harder because you've already lived through decades of news cycles. You've seen the patterns. You know how these stories play out, so your brain isn't just processing today's information. It's cross-referencing it with similar situations from the past, running predictions, calculating implications, maintaining a mental file of ongoing situations that might develop into something important. You're not watching the news. You're running a comprehensive geopolitical analysis operation inside your head while simultaneously trying to remember if you need milk. Your brain is doing Pentagon-level strategic thinking about situations you have zero control over. That takes energy. Massive amounts of it. Military survival training teaches something relevant here. Information discipline. You don't consume all available information. You consume information you can act on. Everything else is noise that clutters your decision-making capacity. Experienced people in high-stress fields, soldiers, emergency responders, surgeons, they limit their information intake to what's immediately relevant to their mission. You can do the same. Doesn't mean ignorance. Means being selective. One guy I talked to, former journalist, switched to reading a single daily news summary instead of scrolling feeds all day. 10 minutes of curated information instead of 3 hours of algorithmic outrage. He said the first week felt like withdrawal. His brain kept reaching for the news like an addict looking for a fix. After 2 weeks, his anxiety dropped noticeably. After a month, he realized he wasn't actually less informed about things that mattered. He just wasn't carrying the emotional weight of every terrible thing happening everywhere all the time. Some people do news fasts, 1 day a week, completely disconnected from current events. Sounds irresponsible until you try it and realize the world doesn't fall apart because you didn't read about it for 24 hours. Your brain gets a recovery day from processing global trauma. The tricky part is that news consumption feels productive, feels responsible, like you're doing something important by staying aware, but awareness without action is just voluntary suffering. Your brain can't tell the difference between reading about a crisis and experiencing a crisis. The stress response is similar. You're essentially traumatizing yourself repeatedly with situations you cannot affect while wondering why you feel mentally exhausted. Then there's the 5th drain, and this one people really don't want to hear. Unresolved conflicts from your past that you thought you'd moved on from but actually didn't. Your brain is still running background processing on arguments from 10 years ago, betrayals from 20 years ago, decisions you made at 30 that you're still second-guessing at 55. You think you've made peace with something. Haven't thought about it in months, maybe years. Then some random trigger, a smell, a phrase, a situation that rhymes with the old pain, and suddenly you're right back there. Not just remembering it, re-experiencing it. Your heart rate increases. Your mood shifts. You find yourself mentally arguing with people who might not even be alive anymore, definitely aren't in your life anymore, explaining your side of something that happened during the first term of a president who's now retired. This is different from trauma, though it can overlap. This is about unfinished emotional business, situations where you never got closure, never got to say your piece, never received the apology you deserved, never fully processed what happened. Your brain files these under pending rather than resolved. Every similar situation you encounter now doesn't just deal with the present, it reopens all the pending files. Someone disrespects you at work. Your brain doesn't just handle the current disrespect. It pulls up the file from when your father dismissed your career choice, when your ex-spouse belittled your ideas, when that teacher said you'd never amount to anything. You're not just tired from today's conflict. You're tired from relitigating 30 years of disrespect simultaneously. The solution here isn't therapy speak about doing the work or processing your trauma, though those can help. The practical approach that worked for people I've talked to is something called closing the loop on old business. Doesn't mean confronting everyone who ever wronged you. Most of the time, that's impossible or counterproductive. Means actively deciding that certain things are finished. Writing letters you'll never send. Saying out loud to yourself the things you never got to say. Consciously giving yourself the validation or apology you never received from others. Sounds like weird self-help nonsense until you actually do it and notice how much mental energy you get back. One guy, 62-year-old contractor, spent 26 years carrying rage at a former business partner who screwed him over. Brought it up constantly. Retold the story to anyone who'd listen. Imagined confrontations where he'd make the guy admit what he did. His wife finally told him he was spending more energy on this grudge than he'd lost in the actual betrayal. He did something simple but powerful. Wrote a 10-page letter to the former partner, detailing exactly how the betrayal affected him, what it cost him, what he thought about the guy's character. Then burned it. Told himself out loud, "I'm done carrying this. It happened. It was wrong. I'm not forgetting it, but I'm finishing it." Said the mental relief was immediate. Like setting down a heavy backpack he'd been carrying for decades without realizing how much it weighed. The thing about unresolved past conflicts is they're always ready to activate. Your brain maintains them in a state of high availability because it thinks you might need to defend yourself or prove your point or finally win the argument. Keeping all that ready to deploy takes energy. Constant energy. Even when you're not consciously thinking about it. Sixth drain is particularly relevant after 50 because you've had more time to accumulate the thing that causes it. Physical clutter that creates mental clutter. Not talking about being neat versus messy. Talking about the accumulated stuff of a long life that your brain has to track and manage and make decisions about every single day. You've got clothes from 3 different body sizes, kitchen gadgets you used once, books you'll never read again but feel guilty donating, papers and documents you might need someday, sentimental items from people you barely remember, gifts you never wanted but felt obligated to keep. Your house isn't just full of stuff. It's full of unmade decisions, unresolved questions, and guilt. Every item you own asks your brain a question. Do I need this? Should I keep this? Where should this go? What if I need it later? What if getting rid of it is disrespectful to the person who gave it to me? Your brain is running a constant inventory management system for thousands of objects, most of which you don't use, don't need, and don't even like. Here's the thing about physical clutter after 50. When you were 30, you had more energy to manage it. You could handle the mental overhead of owning lots of stuff because your brain had processing power to spare. At 50, with all the other drains competing for your mental energy, the clutter stops being neutral. It becomes actively expensive. Professional organizers who work with older adults see this constantly. People who've been meaning to clean out the garage for 15 years, declutter the closets, deal with the basement full of boxes. It's not laziness. It's that even thinking about the project triggers decision fatigue before they start. Each item requires a decision. Multiply that by thousands of items, and the task feels impossible. The people who actually succeed with this don't try to declutter everything at once. They use what some call the 10-minute purge. Set a timer for 10 minutes, grab a trash bag, go through one small area, maybe a single drawer or shelf, and remove everything that's an obvious no. Broken items, duplicates, things you forgot you owned. Don't make difficult decisions. Just grab the clear nose, 10 minutes done. Do that once a week, and in a year you've done over 50 sessions. That's a lot of clutter removed, without ever having to psych yourself up for a massive decluttering project. More importantly, each session frees up a little bit of mental energy. Your brain has fewer items to track, fewer decisions pending. The cumulative effect is significant. One woman, 57 years old, said she removed 2 items from her house every day for a year. Just 2 things. Could be big or small, didn't matter. Some days it was 2 expired condiments from the fridge. Some days it was a piece of furniture she'd been keeping out of guilt. 730 items gone by the end of the year. Her house didn't look dramatically different, but she said her mental clarity improved noticeably. Felt like she could think better in her own space. The resistance to decluttering usually isn't about the stuff itself. It's about the decisions the stuff represents. Getting rid of your college textbooks means accepting you're never going back to school. Donating clothes that don't fit means acknowledging your body changed. Throwing out old hobbies means admitting you're not going to take up oil painting or learn guitar. Each item is tied to an identity or a hope or a guilt, and dealing with the stuff means dealing with those emotions. But keeping everything doesn't avoid those emotions. It just makes you process them repeatedly every time you see the items, move around them, or try to find something in the clutter. You're not saving emotional energy by keeping things. You're spending it constantly. Then there's the 7th drain, and this one is probably the most important because it amplifies everything else. Poor sleep that you've accepted as normal for your age, but actually isn't. You're getting 6 hours when you need 8. Or you're getting 8 hours but waking up 4 times. Or you fall asleep fine, but wake up at 3 in the morning with your brain running scenarios and can't get back to sleep. You mention it to your doctor. They say sleep changes as you age. They're not wrong, but they're also not giving you the full picture. Yes, sleep architecture changes after 50. You get less deep sleep, more fragmented sleep. Your circadian rhythm shifts. But a lot of what people blame on aging is actually caused by fixable issues they've stopped paying attention to. Caffeine after 2 in the afternoon, screens before bed, room temperature above 68 degrees, alcohol as a sleep aid that actually disrupts sleep cycles, irregular sleep schedule because you're retired or semi-retired and don't have to keep a schedule anymore. Sleeping on a mattress that should have been replaced during the previous presidential administration. Letting your mind race through tomorrow's to-do list or yesterday's regrets instead of having a wind-down routine. Here's why sleep deprivation is the ultimate mental energy drain after 50. Every other drain gets worse when you're not sleeping well. Decision fatigue doubles when you're tired. Emotional regulation for those one-sided relationships, almost impossible on poor sleep. Processing your news consumption, dealing with old conflicts, managing clutter. Your brain needs sleep to do all of that. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it makes you bad at everything else. One retired cop I talked to said he spent his entire career running on 5 hours of sleep, drinking coffee all day and feeling fine. Retired at 54 and suddenly couldn't understand why he felt mentally foggy all the time. Wasn't stress from work, wasn't early dementia, was decades of accumulated sleep debt finally catching up now that he didn't have adrenaline and necessity pushing him through it. He started treating sleep like a job. Same bedtime every night, even weekends. Bedroom temperature at 65 degrees. No screens after 8. No caffeine after noon. Boring routine. No exceptions. First 2 weeks were hard. His brain fought the new schedule. After 3 weeks, he started sleeping through the night. After 2 months, he said the mental clarity was better than it had been in 20 years. Not because he was sleeping more hours than he used to, because he was finally getting quality sleep instead of just unconsciousness. The military teaches something relevant here too. Sleep discipline. You don't sleep when you feel like it. You sleep on a schedule because performance depends on it. Soldiers in combat zones maintain sleep discipline even under terrible conditions because they know fatigue kills faster than most threats. You might not be in combat, but your brain is fighting just as hard against all these energy drains. It needs the recovery that only proper sleep provides. Some people resist sleep routines because they feel restrictive, like you're giving up freedom or spontaneity. But here's the reality. You're not free when you're exhausted. You're not spontaneous when your brain is too tired to generate ideas or enthusiasm. The freedom to stay up late watching television you don't care about isn't actually freedom. It's just undisciplined use of time that costs you the next day. The thing nobody tells you about these 7 drains is that they're interconnected. Fix one and the others get easier. Improve your sleep and you have more energy for decision-making. Reduce decision fatigue and you have more capacity for setting boundaries. Set better boundaries and you have less stress affecting your sleep. Clear some clutter and your environment stops triggering background anxiety that disrupts everything else. It's not about willpower or discipline or being tougher. It's about recognizing that mental energy after 50 works differently than it did at 30. You don't have the same surplus to waste on things that don't matter. You can't afford to let invisible drains run in the background anymore. The good news is, you also have something you didn't have at 30. Enough life experience to know what actually matters and what's just noise. Young people spray their energy everywhere because they don't know better and they can afford to. You can't afford to anymore, but you also don't need to. You know which relationships are real and which are performative. You know which decisions actually matter and which are just preferences. You know what information is useful and what's just entertainment disguised as news. You know the difference between holding on to something meaningful and hoarding things out of guilt or fear. The mental energy you have at 50 plus is more valuable than the energy you had at 25 because it comes with wisdom about how to use it. But only if you protect it. Only if you identify what's draining it and make the changes necessary to stop the leak. Not massive overhauls, just targeted adjustments to how you handle decisions, relationships, information, your past, your environment, and your sleep. Most people hit 50 and assume the exhaustion is just part of aging, something to accept and work around. They're wrong. The exhaustion is from carrying things you don't need to carry anymore, doing things you don't need to do anymore, and giving energy to people and situations that don't deserve it. You spent 40 or 50 years accumulating these drains. They feel normal now, but normal doesn't mean necessary. The people who thrive after 50 aren't the ones with the most energy. They're the ones who protect the energy they have, who recognize that every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that matters, who understand that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival, who know that you can't pour from an empty cup, and spending your mental energy on 7 different drains means you're running on empty most of the time. Your brain at 50 is not broken, it's just operating in a more complex environment with more demands than it was designed to handle. Simplify the environment, reduce the demands. Protect your mental energy like it's the most valuable resource you have, because it is.